In 1858, Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas were vying for a single seat in the United States Senate. Lincoln, the Republican challenger, and Douglas, the Democratic incumbent, held a series of debates in Illinois. With the nation watching, these great political minds took stands on key issues, the greatest of all, slavery. Looking at Lincoln and Douglas's background and key political differences reveals the influential results and lasting consequences of this historic verbal clash. Born in 1809, Abraham Lincoln grew up on frontier farms in Kentucky and Indiana, where his mother supported his desire for a formal education. At the age of 21, Lincoln moved to Illinois and lived on his own. Stephen Arnold Douglas, born 4 years after Lincoln in 1813, lived in Vermont for the majority of his childhood. Douglas received only a minimum of formal education. At the age of 20, Douglas also settled in Illinois. On the political field, Lincoln and Douglas both experienced their share of defeats. Running for a position on the state assembly as an anti-Jackson Whig, Lincoln lost in a mostly Democratic district. After rallying support for Zachary Taylor throughout New England, Lincoln did not receive a cabinet position, resulting in his temporary withdrawal from politics. In 1837, Douglas lost the election to Congress as a Democrat. 5 years later, he lost another election to the Senate. Lincoln stated, "Always bear in mind that your own resolution to succeed is more important than any other." So, despite some failures, both Lincoln and Douglas obtained a lot of experience as young adults and went on to have prominent political careers. In 1834, Lincoln was elected to the Illinois State Assembly, where he would serve 4 two-year terms and became the leader of the Whig minority. After moving to the Illinois state capital of Springfield, Lincoln, who had been studying law, was admitted to the bar. In 1846, 4 years after he married Mary Todd, Lincoln was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. As the Republican Party began to emerge after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, Lincoln resumed a role in politics by campaigning for Republican John C. Fremont. 3 years before Lincoln, Douglas was admitted to the Illinois bar and began his own law practice. Later, Douglas was appointed to the Illinois Supreme Court. In 1836, Douglas briefly served in the state legislature and became the leader of the Democratic Party's statewide campaigns. Douglas also held the position of Illinois Secretary of State and was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In 1847, Douglas was elected to the U.S. Senate and married Martha Denny Martin, the daughter of a Southern slaveholder. Several years later, Douglas was easily reelected to the Senate. Early in the senatorial campaign of 1858, Lincoln challenged Douglas to a series of debates held in different towns in Illinois. The leading topic of discussion was whether or not slavery should legally be expanded into free territories. Lincoln and Douglas had opposing stands on issues such as national unity, the Dred Scott case, and slavery. On June 16, 1858, Abraham Lincoln gave his House divided speech at the Illinois Republican Convention, where he received his nomination to the U.S. Senate. While Lincoln and the Republicans vowed that the nation would become all one thing or all the other, Douglas believed that each region, state, and individual could live their own lives and choose to own or not own slaves. "The framers of our government never contemplated uniformity in their internal concerns," stated Douglas. Therefore, Douglas, a strong advocate of popular sovereignty, wanted to allow the voters of each territory to make their own choice about the extension of slavery. In the Scott v. Stanford case of 1857, the Supreme Court ruled that Dred Scott, an African-American slave, could live in a free state while still keeping his status of a slave. The Supreme Court went on to declare that all blacks, slave as well as free, were not and could never become United States citizens. Lincoln believed that this decision would lead to the legalization of slavery in all states, which he strongly opposed. Douglas supported the Supreme Court's decision. Douglas believed that "this government of ours is founded on the white basis. A Negro, an Indian, or any other man of an inferior race could be enslaved without any violation of free governments, because the American free government had never intended to include them." Lincoln took a moral stance on slavery by commenting, "It is the eternal struggle between these two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world. They are the two principles that have stood face to face from the beginning of time, and will ever continue to struggle. No matter in what shape it comes, whether from the mouth of a king who seeks to bestride the people of his own nation and live by the fruit of their labor, or from one race of men as an apology for enslaving another, it is the same tyrannical principle." The Lincoln-Douglas debates consisted of 7 formal debates in 7 of the 9 Illinois congressional districts where Douglas had not already spoken. In each debate, either Douglas or Lincoln opened with a 1-hour address. Then the other spoke for an hour and a half. The first then had 30 minutes of rebuttal. Douglas, because he was the incumbent, spoke first 4 times. The first debate took place in Ottawa on August 21st. The Chicago Times reported, "At an early hour, Ottawa was alive with people. From daylight till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the crowds came in by train, by canal boat, and by wagon, carriage, buggy, and on horseback." During this debate, Douglas accused Lincoln of being pro-abolition, and he accused Lincoln's party, the Republicans, of creating an abolitionist platform in 1854. He asked Lincoln 7 questions surrounding the issue of slavery. Lincoln did not answer any of Douglas's questions. Instead, he used his time to defend the allegations made against him. Lincoln declared, "There is no reason in the world why the Negro is not entitled to all the natural rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I hold that he is as much entitled to these as the white man. I agree with Judge Douglas he is not my equal in many respects, certainly not in color, perhaps not in moral or intellectual endowment, but in the right to eat the bread without leave of anybody else, which his own hand earns, he is my equal, and the equal of Judge Douglas, and the equal of every living man." Lincoln showed the public his stance on the Dred Scott decision, and his opposition to slavery's expansion into all new territories. However, Lincoln also showed that he did not believe African Americans were fully equal to white men, and that he was not pro-abolition. In response, Lincoln charged Douglas of nationalizing slavery by supporting the Supreme Court's decision in the Dred Scott case. The first debate, like those to come, did not produce a clear winner. The debate depended entirely on which paper you read. The Chicago Press and Tribune noted that Doug is played out, that he was completely whipped in the debate. Likewise, the Illinois State Journal stated that Mr. Lincoln came forward with a number of new points which Mr. Douglas could not and did not meet. However, the Chicago Times recorded, "Poor Lincoln was greatly embarrassed," and the Illinois State Register wrote that the debate resulted in Douglas's complete overthrow of his opponents. The newspaper's views on the debates varied just as much as Lincoln and Douglas's speaking styles. An onlooker of the debates commented, "I have never seen any other 2 public men appearing on the same platform so unlike in stature. Lincoln towered over Douglas and clothed himself in dusty, worn-out, and wrinkled attire. Douglas was a short man who dressed immaculately. Lincoln delivered his speeches with the greatest animation, yet with great caution as well. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. Even though Lincoln spoke without any detectable hesitation, he did not possess as much ease as Douglas. Douglas was quick to respond to questions and had a fiery, energetic spirit." After 7 debates that captivated Americans nationwide, Douglas was re-elected to the U.S. Senate. Douglas's re-election was only the immediate effect of the debates. During the debates, Douglas had declared that the residents of a territory may come together to keep out slavery from their territory, despite the Dred Scott decision. This angered the South and caused sections of the South to turn away from Douglas in the presidential election of 1860. For Lincoln, the positive effects of his losing were far-reaching. Due to his national popularity and previous experience with Douglas, Lincoln was nominated by the Republican Party for president in 1860. With the Democrats divided, Lincoln won the election. The Lincoln-Douglas debates set a new standard for political campaigns and majorly impacted the direction of the United States.